Sean Patterson. Hi, Mount Vernon. This is Mayor Sean Patterson Howard, and we're just coming to you today with a special live update. We've been talking about since January of 2020 that we had asked the New York State Comptroller to come in and do some audits because we were concerned about internal controls and other things that were happening here in the city of Mount Vernon. And so, last August, the New York State Comptroller had released a report regarding the policies and procedures of the Comptroller's office and the city of Mount Vernon. And just today, they released the non-payroll disbursement audit for the city of Mount Vernon, which they've been working on for about a year and a half. And I just really wanted to give you some information and updates concerning that. And so we're going to go and we're going to start out. We've prepared a PowerPoint presentation that we will share with you now. So Malcolm, if you can upload that. Ready? So the New York State Comptroller's report. So here we have, if you can go to the first page. So some of the key findings, and I just decided to put it up here on screen so that you could see it for yourself. It says that the former comptroller implemented a manual voucher system that restricted the ability of officials and employees to monitor operations and perverted officials from accounting for committed funds. Also, her system perverted officials from determining whether vendors had been paid. The comptroller made 25 unauthorized electronic disbursements and 3 withdrawals totaling $16.4 million, of which $15.1 million circumvented the mayor's required countersignature of checks. She used contingency appropriations to pay $1.3 million in expenditures without the council's knowledge and approval. She did not seek reimbursement for approximately $7,500 out of $30,000 in disbursements made to former comptrollers outside counsel, which was in violation of a court order. And the former comptroller's lack of transparency also resulted in city officials operating under the expectation that appropriations were available when the former comptroller had already expended them. We'll get into this a little bit deeper. It also says that key findings that the comptroller and city officials did not provide proper oversight of non-payroll disbursements. The former comptroller did not properly or transparently account for all non-payroll disbursements. Her failure to provide this information or perform her duties resulted in untimely payment of claims and litigation. And as a result, the city's reputation with its vendors was damaged, and the city paid for additional potentially unnecessary disbursements related to litigation. So Malcolm, if you could just go forward to the next slide. So here are just some of the quick facts. The auditors in this non-payroll disbursement, they said there were 6,900, hold on, let me put on my glasses, 6,989 checks that were dispersed between January 2018 and September 2020. This is what they had an opportunity to review. There were 256 electronic transfers for $169.6 million. And then there were 13 withdrawals for $11.1 million. And these were the things that were tested. And then paid by check, non-payroll claims that were tested is 205 checks for $1.3 million, electronic 41 checks were tested in the amount of $11.5 million, and 6 withdrawals for $6.6 million. And then there were payments to the former comptrollers outside counsel, 22 checks that they reviewed for $327,938. We're asking that you please take a moment of your time and share this. If you could please share this Facebook Live, we would really, really appreciate it. So we're going to step in a little bit further. Okay. So, one of the biggest things that you have to look at when you're looking at any financial operations is what they call a segregation of duties. That means you should have one person collect money, another person count the money and drop the money into, I guess, your internal safe. Someone else should take it to the bank. And then when the bank, the monthly bank statements come in, someone should do reconciliation. And this is not something that happened in the former comptroller's office under Deborah Reynolds. Um, the segregation of duties, the former comptroller had the sole ability to audit claims and approve them for payment. Although the charter established the comptroller as claims auditor and the individual responsible for disbursement, the charter requires the mayor to countersign all checks by the comptroller. And as a compensating control. However, we found that the former comptroller disregarded and circumvented this control. It says specifically they found that the current mayor, me, was not an authorized signatory on any of the 40 city bank accounts maintained in 2020 and had only access to 4 of 14 online bank accounts. And as a result, the former comptroller was able to circumvent the authorization process established by the charter and issue payments without the mayor's knowledge, which increased the risk that the former comptroller could make unauthorized purchases, approve them for payment, issue a check, and make an electronic disbursement to pay for these without being detected. Bank reconciliations. For those of you who have bank accounts or even credit card statements, at the end of each month, you look at them and you want to make sure that what has been charged to your account in every transaction is accounted for. And if it's accounted for wrong, you're going to challenge it. So the former comptroller, when it came to bank reconciliations, did not ensure that the bank reconciliations were prepared since December of 2018. So the past 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021, there was no reconciliation of the bank statements. While the comptroller told the state that the bank reconciliations weren't prepared because the employee that was responsible left the city's employment, this person didn't leave the city's employment until February of 2020. So she can't explain why none of this had happened in 2019. And even when that person left in 2020, while this was not assigned to another person, or that she never hired in these empty positions anyone who was qualified to move forward and do the city's bank reconciliations. Okay. So one of the things that the state comptroller found is that the disbursement process was not properly designed. They said here, and this is just a figure, all of this you can download off of the state's website. We have a link here for that information. It said, we found that the comptroller unilaterally removed the city's electronic purchase order system used to document authorization to order and incur and expedite for specific goods or services, and implemented a manual voucher system in June 2018, which restricted the ability of officials and employees to monitor financial operations of the city. I mean, this right here is very challenging. Again, you're supposed to be able to go online in the city system and put in purchases, have them approved by the department head. Then they're approved by the mayor's office and sent down to the comptroller. Everything became a paper system, which made it run slow and made her have total control without any checks and balances on this. Next slide. The comptroller made unauthorized disbursements. Again, this is not coming from my statement. This is coming from the state comptroller's report. And you can see it right here. The former comptroller made unauthorized disbursements, that the comptroller maintained 47 bank accounts with 3 different banks and had online banking capabilities for 14 accounts associated with 1 bank. The state requested the banking agreement with the former comptroller, showing how online banking was supposed to be done. And there was never an online banking or an online financial disbursement agreement done and executed by the city council or the board of estimate. It said, although officials were not authorized to make electronic disbursements, the former comptroller made 256 non-payroll electronic disbursements to 80 different vendors, totaling $169.6 million. Electronic disbursements to her attorneys that were not authorized, electronic disbursements to an IT vendor for the installation of a firewall, to put a firewall in between her and the city administration and the legislative body. This is a check request that had come before me. I questioned it back in January of 2020, as well as a payment to her attorney. I refused to sign those checks without backup. And really, it was as of January 17th that things began to go haywire when I questioned some of the checks that she wanted me to sign. And so, these are just some of the challenges that we're seeing. It also says that, again, checks were not approved by the council or by the board of estimate, or endorsed by the corporation council or countersigned by the mayor as required by the charter. She was making payments to her outside attorneys. And it said on the right, it said disbursements commonly made by check were instead made by the former Comptroller Reynolds through electronic disbursement or certified check. If you look at the small box in the top right hand of this slide, it says figure 3. In 2017, when Maureen Walker was the comptroller, there was about $7 million in electronic disbursements made. By 2018, when Comptroller Reynolds came in, it jumped up fivefold to 36 million. By 2019, it jumped up again to 81 million. And in 2020, it dropped down to 54 million. Again, you can see from 2017 to 2019, the use or the overuse of electronic disbursements, it jumped almost 12 times, which is very, very concerning. Thank you. We have our comptroller, Darren Morton, who has joined us for this live. Comptroller Morton, just this one slide right here alone, does that cause any pause for you? Just one slide around electronic disbursements going from 7 million in 2017 to 81 million in 2019?
Well, I would say absolutely. I think that, first of all, without any particular policies and procedures in place, and to ensure that there are checks and balances, that the internal controls are in place, it's even more alarming. But there's no explanation for the exponential increase of electronic disbursements. And so that's it leaves room for, if not fraud and criminal activity, it leaves room for misuse and mismanagement of money.
Absolutely. Malcolm, you can advance to the next slide. So again, the state comptroller said there was a circumvention of countersignature through electronic disbursement. And it says, plain and simple, the former comptroller circumvented the mayor's countersignature. These disbursements would typically go through the accounts payable process, and checks would be printed, allowing for oversight by the mayor. While the mayor had read-only access to the city's main operating account, I was not involved in the electronic disbursement process or issuance of certified checks. Therefore, I had no way of authorizing electronic disbursement or certified check. And by using electronic disbursements, basically the comptroller just went around any of the checks and balances that were put in place by the charter for us to operate as part of very, very critical internal controls. The former comptroller. And so, today was the first time that I signed off on an electronic disbursement in the 2 years that I've been here. And there was absolutely a process that was in place, very similar to me signing off on a check where, it was sent up, and my counter signature was given for the electronic disbursement and backup, letting me know exactly what the payment was for. So thank you so much, Comptroller Morton, for being in office for a month almost today and already having started to put into process proper internal control procedures. Thank you so much.
Well, let me just jump in and say, one, I mean, as a comptroller, as the chief financial officer, also, I don't want to be the individual person that's signing off on electronic transfers for settlements that are particularly that large, right? I mean, we're talking about sometimes large amounts of money. You want to make sure that, if nothing else, that the chief executive officer knows that, first of all, something that has been settled or something that has to be paid electronically, that it actually is paid. And then the other thing that it does, as you so eloquently stated, is that we also ensure that we have the proper paperwork for when the auditor comes, and if they particularly test any of those items, that all of that information is there to support that. So that's what we started today. We know we got to tweak it a little bit more, because we also want to make sure that on the back end of it, that the mayor is also able to see that it has been executed.
Okay. Yes, I'm sitting here and I'm looking on my phone at some of the comments on Facebook Live, and people are saying that they're really, really happy that this information is finally coming out. Unfortunately, prior to this report, there were those who wanted to make this seem like it was just finger pointing. It was a blame game. It was part of the traditional infighting here in city government. But no, this was a concern that we had right out the gate. We had heard about a lot of these things before becoming elected. We heard about it through the campaign. And, on January, the first week in January, when in Albany for a meeting, had an opportunity to see the comptroller and say, look, please, we invite you in. We have concerns. Um, we need to verify what's happening. We just don't have access to this information. And the state came in, and clearly the state comptroller's office had nothing to gain politically through this report. They don't work for us. They don't work for the former comptroller. They work for the state of New York, and sent in an independent audit team to really drill down over these past 2 years to be able to produce this report. And so, again, it's very it's it's a relief to see our concerns that many critiqued as being political are actually being validated. But what's even better is at this time that we have a new comptroller in place, who I don't expect to, in any way, to misuse authorities, and that we, as the mayor, the comptroller, the city council, will be working together to put forth a charter review commission, so that we could address these things in the revising of our charter, as well as any ordinances and codes that we have to change leading up to a full revamp of the charter. So it said officials did not ensure that vendors were paid in a timely manner. And, that's one of the things I always said with the state comptroller. Why do we just use the word officials? But it's anyone who is official. And so it said disbursements to vendors were not made in a timely manner. They reviewed 125 claims, totaling more than 2.4 million, and found that 88 claims were paid late. Street sweeper lease totaling 86,959, paid 232 days late. Um, Also charging us an additional $13,044, and they were coming to confiscate these things. An invoice dated March 12th, 2020, from the police department's fingerprint system was not paid until August 10th. Another instance of an invoice dated from February 7th, for the police department's 911 phone and recording system was not paid until July 9th. So if the police department can't even have a proper fingerprint or 911 recording and radio system, I mean, these were the type of things that we wrote the state comptroller, the state AG, and the governor, stating that these are some of the things that put the public safety of our community at risk. Maintenance on the fire department's breathing apparatuses paid 83 days late. These are the essential equipment that our fire department needs just to go into a fire. An invoice dated back to March 2020 for repairs to a malfunctioning aerial boom on the fire engine was not paid until June 2020, 82 days late. So that was one of my continuous cries, is that public safety was being put at risk, as the controller would not process payments to our vendors in a timely manner. Comptroller Morton, I mean, you were the chief of staff during this time, and you're the controller now. Any thoughts about this type of system or lack of a system?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that when you think about streamlining payments, that we have to make sure that we hold to what we say is our practice, right? Which is about 30 to 45 days kind of a payments out. And all that it does is it adds to the cost for the city. I mean, right now, we've been working with DPW and some of the vendors to see if we can negotiate some of these late fees, right? Because it's what happens is when things are late, they then add up the cost, because we then have additional costs for late penalties from our vendors, in which we have to try to now go back and negotiate. And so that's part of the problem too. It's not just about the reputation of the city as being a slow or a non-payer, but also it's about the bottom line. For me as the comptroller, I'm trying to figure out how we can maximize our resources, not wastefully have it go out the window because we don't have good practices in place.
Right here, and I'm going to read both of these paragraphs because I don't want anyone thinking that we're just trying to make the former controller look bad. It said the state controller found that disbursements were delayed because the former controller failed to work with department heads to schedule appointments to submit claims for processing. For example, the DPW commissioner requested an appointment to submit claims to the former controller at least 4 times over the course of 12 days, before receiving an appointment date 19 days after the original request. But then it said also we found certain instances where department heads did not submit claims packages to the former controller in a timely manner. And I can tell you one, there was a claim for the street sweepers that hadn't been submitted, probably going back to 2018. When we found that, we submitted it, and again, instead of kind of working with us to deal with the fact that that happened prior to this administration, she would just double down and say, well, you're wrong, and everyone was wrong. But then it says, in addition, the former controller contributed to late payments in other instances by holding on to claims for an extended period of time after she received them from the departments. So it says the untimely payment of claims resulted in damage to the city's reputation with its vendors. Anyone's credit score is very important. And when when vendors decide that they're going to cut you off, or they're only going to deal with you on a cash basis, it makes it very, very difficult for you anything, from being able to order paper so that we could send out um, the sanitation schedules to the residents, being able to go down to Home Depot or Lowe's or to one of the lumber yards in the community and purchase wood so that we could cover up and close zombie homes, to fixing potholes, to just delivering basic city services because equipment and trucks were breaking down when they weren't paid. All of these things impacted the city's ability to provide the most basic service to the residents, which also caused a lack of trust and frustration for our residents, who were just tired of hearing that the controller wouldn't pay, or we didn't have the money, or bills couldn't get paid. And like they say, Nero fiddled while Rome burned, and that's one of the challenges. And so we understand clearly the frustration of the residents. And while there's been increased distrust, because so many of the residents said, how could this happen, and how could people know this is happening and no one do anything about it? Why were the calls to remove her unheeded? What happened? How could this go on? Like we said, it's not, it was never within our purview as a city to be able to remove her. That had to come from a place much higher than our authority, and it just did not happen. Claims for essential services and infrastructure were unpaid. You were here before me, and we knew about this for a long time. So this is something that the residents complain about all the time. You talk about street resurfacing, potholes. Going all the way back to February 2019, the city was billed for about $370,000 for some street resurfacing. The council approved the street resurfacing order. The Board of Estimate approved it. The council approved it in March. The Board of Estimate approved a settlement to the vendors pending lawsuit in November of 2020, because the bill went from February of 2019. The council approved it, and everything that needed to be done, and the former city comptroller refused to pay the bill. The vendor went after the city in a lawsuit in November of 2020 for the same amount that they billed in the beginning. This is what we settled with them, saying we would pay the street resurfacing without any of the interest, any of the penalties. And still again, the former comptroller did not pay it. And a month later, the judge awarded $424,622 to the vendor, including almost $56,000 in interest. The former comptroller again was informed that they had to pay, and she had to pay in a timely manner, and she had not done it. And so in April of 2021, the bank just went in and they just withdrew the money electronically from the city's bank account. So we're going back from February of 2019 all the way until April of 2021, where this one vendor was trying to get payment for street resurfacing. And this is money that if we paid, we would have been able to be reimbursed in a very timely manner from the New York State, from a grant that we received, a CHIPS grant, and a Pave New York grant. So this is, this just shows you plain and simple how basic city business came to a halt as bills were not paid, as we incurred fines and interest, as lawsuits were levied against the city and judgments were given against the city. And again, there was a deterioration in confidence by our vendors for the city to be able to handle basic business, and a deterioration of confidence of our residents for the city to deliver essential services to the community.
So, Mayor, before you move on from that, because you said, I think go back to your timeline, because your timeline said it took us all the way up to April of 2021. Um, that's untrue. It took us all the way up to January of 2022.
Okay.
Because in addition to that, what happened is they levied the account, but they also put a hold on the account. And they put on a hold on the account that stayed on a hold on the account until I was going through and reconciling the bank statements about a week and a half ago, and recognized that they were holding 400 and some odd $1,000 because they from the original amount, and began to ask the question as to what this hold is, right? And it was attached to this levy, in which I then contacted the DPW commissioner to ask them to investigate because I knew that they had already taken the $318,000 out. Well, after a while, we got in touch with the lawyer, and they recognized that they had just forgotten to inform the bank that it had been paid. So, in essence, from a cash flow standpoint, our money was tied up, and now several months later, it's tied up, not being able to be utilized because of this action. And we have a few of those other examples too, where money just was taken out of the account because of judgments, late payments, and not being able to pay, not paying them on time, and tacking onto it not only the interest, but also penalties, or what they call in New York City marshal fees, for seizing the money. So this kind of practice has got to stop.
So, I'm going to go through this one really quickly. Claims for essential services and infrastructure were unpaid. Um, 31 claims for almost 35,000 for telephone and internet service providers were paid on average 264 days late. None of us here in City Hall even have cable right now. And I'm not talking about HBO cable. We can't watch News 12 as part of the business day because all of the cable in City Hall is turned off. And we were at risk for losing our internet, which would have not allowed us to do any business. 20 claims totaling 19,539 for a fuel vendor were paid on average 71 days late. Some were paid as many as 102 days late. And you can remember we had to go to court, I believe in May of 2021, to get her to pay some fuel bills. And people criticized me, but unfortunately we had to, when the weekends came and we couldn't get a delivery to the DPW yard on Friday for fuel, then that means police cars and fire engines, or not fire engines, but police cars and some of the fire support trucks and DPW trucks wouldn't be able to get gas. And we were buying gas. The city was buying gas from a corner store gas vendor. We're grateful, but that's just not the way that business should be done. Sewer emergency payments took over 800 days. I, to this date, have not even been in office for 800 days yet. And so, again, this made it difficult for vendors to come and do work with us. And when we know that our residents and some of our businesses and even municipal buildings are dealing with sewer backups, we need to be able to call our sewer partners and ask them to come and give relief, because that becomes a public safety, but even a public health issue. And tire vendors being paid 126 days late. Some were paid as many as 250 days late, resulting in DPW trucks that we had to pull off of the road because their tires were unraveling and didn't even have enough traction to stop and were sliding through red lights. This is not the way that the city can do business and deliver services. The former controller didn't properly account for non-payroll disbursements. She used contingency monies, and stated that she didn't understand that she couldn't move money out of the contingency budget and pay for bills. But I don't know if any of you followed Board of Estimate meetings. She always said, well, there's no money in this account. You have to transfer money. You have to get permission from the city council and the Board of Estimate and then send it to me, show me where there's money, and then transfer it so that I could pay these bills. But that didn't go for her. If she wanted to pay something, she just went into the contingency appropriation or the fund balance, which both are supposed to be approved by city council and the Board of Estimate to make payments. And she said she was unaware that she needed to go through that process, to pay for bills if a funded line was short, in order to pay a bill. So that's just, it's unfortunate. She held us to a standard that she did not hold herself to. And while we followed the procedures and made transfers, unfortunately she did not follow the procedures to make those transfers.
I think that it's also important to note that that is general municipal law, right? As it pertains to government accounting, right? You got fund accounting. There's only a certain accounts that the chief fiscal officer can actually unilaterally take money out for a reason, such as judgments. Like get a judgment, you don't necessarily need a voucher to pay the judgment because the judgment itself is the voucher. But you also cannot move money from contingency without the legislative body approving for that to occur. And you definitely cannot take it from restricted funds, such as the fund balance or any other special restricted fund, because that would violate general municipal law around accounting for government.
So yes, one of the comments, Mr. Maurice Dexter said that department heads would get all documents time stamped from the former controller to prove invoices were submitted. I know this for a fact until the department heads were denied appointments. And that's true. Anything that was brought down to her, she wanted it to be time stamped to show when she received it. But at the same time, sometimes that was also used against us because when we could not get appointments or when we did submit paperwork, I saw that there were instances in 2018, 2019 where paperwork was submitted to the controller. It was time stamped. The controller lost the paperwork. She told department heads to resubmit it. And then when they resubmitted, she made them sign on a line saying that they submitted the paperwork late. And that's something that the different commissioners ended up doing over and over again. She reproduced paperwork, made people stipulate to handing in paperwork late, even though they were just resubmitting paperwork that she had lost, or that they were finally submitting paperwork months after she would not give them an appointment, and they had to sign off that it was their fault and that it was late. But at that time, there was no time to go back and forth and argue whether or not she lost paperwork. They just had to sign off on things. And this is what she tried to do to clear her path of not doing her work. And, unfortunately, she'll be able to produce document after document that she required commissioners to sign, stating that their paperwork was late and that they were at fault and she wasn't at fault. But if those documents weren't signed, again, vendors would not be paid and the work of the business of the city would not be done. And it's just a challenge. And right now, we're not here to continue to point fingers. We're here to let the community know that this report is out, and that you can read it in depth for your own understanding. She even kept the timestamp in her office so that no one else could stamp in documents. She was the sole person who controlled that timestamp and handing in of any paperwork. So another thing, here, I don't know if you want to look at this one yourself, controller. Oftentimes the former controller would say there's no money in the budget, or that the administration had spent the money already, and it's really hard to spend money in a budget line by January or February or March of that year. But what you could see from this slide right here, it said the lease for the city sweep for the street sweepers dating November 2019 was attributed to the 2020 year. City alarm services dated July 2015 were attributed to the 2019 years. Elevator maintenance services dated July 2017 were attributed to 2020. And so whenever she decided to pay a bill, she would put it in whatever budget year she chose to put it in, never attributing it to the proper year. And so we could be 2, 3, 4 months into a year, having not processed really paperwork. And she already told us that we spent our allotment for that year, which we knew was impossible. But what we did know is that she had been making prior year's payments out of the current year's budget, which would make it very difficult for us to do our business.
Well, I mean, also, I think it would have been hard for the former controller to kind of keep track of what year it really was in because the budget itself was not put into the system, right? Which is another one of those egregious, acts, I guess, or responsibilities. If the adopted budget is not in the system, then putting in expenses or even revenues that were not in the system, but even putting revenues and expenses in the system, you would not be able to do a budget to actual analysis for it. And so you're right. I mean, there were a number of things. We're looking at it now to try to make some reconciliations around the 2021 budget expenditures. And what we're finding is that there are a number of expenditures that belong to previous years. Even when the expenditure occurred in a previous year, the voucher occurred in the previous year, and the product had been received in the previous year, which are really the measures for how you really post to a particular fiscal year. And typically, if the budget is not closed, if the books have not been closed even in the system, then you still have a 13-month in which you actually usually put most of those accruals in there. And so they're really this was an avoidable, right, tragedy. This type of thing is avoidable because you can clearly, just from an accounting perspective, put it in its right place.
Right. So, there was always a lot of challenge around legal bills, and like we said, not knowing and always being told there's no money to pay the legal bills, there's no money to pay labor counsel, anything of that nature. But right here it says specifically, we found, this is the state comptroller saying, 35 disbursements totaling $327,938 were made to the former comptroller's outside counsel through their audit period. Further, they found that the outside counsel billed the city an additional $32,734 in services that had not yet been paid for as of September 30th, 2020. Overall, the city incurred $360,672 in fees related to legal services provided by this attorney from January 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2020. And if you look at the note in the left corner, it says the former comptroller used a significant amount of law department appropriations on her outside counsel without the law department's noted knowledge. So it's very hard, again, for the law department to be able to balance their budget and transfer and make sure monies are available to pay the attorneys that are authorized to do work for the city when the comptroller was spending the money on her own outside counsel without going through the proper authorizations with the city council and the board of estimate. Well, really the board of estimate, that's who would have had to approve those. Right here it says that the former comptroller used 92% of the law department's appropriation for litigation services to cover $78,000 in expenditures to her outside counsel in 2018. In 2019, she used 68% of the law department's appropriation for labor counsel for her own outside counsel, 63% of the law department's appropriation for litigation services to cover expenditures for her outside counsel in 2019, and 25% of the city's appropriation for outside services to cover expenditures for her outside counsel in 2020. So this was a practice that she really kind of jumped in and started going at from day one. And I don't think that if we didn't call in the state comptroller that we would have even seen a decline in it in 2020. And I'm sure that there are some expenditures in 2021, but they stopped doing this audit that will eventually come out as well. So yeah, this just shows you again the litigation fees. Um, it's, but we can go on. But she continuously took money from wherever she wanted to take it from to pay her outside counsel, but did not make sure that the city's outside attorneys who were working in on lawsuits and fighting lawsuits to make sure that the city would maintained whole and that we were able to defend the city were paid. Again, lack of payment transparency, that she did have an agreement at one time with the attorney, but they reviewed the agreements with the former comptroller's outside counsel and found that the former comptroller unilaterally entered into an agreement that increased the rates by $100 per hour without the approval of the Board of Estimate, and that the former comptroller provided them with the state comptroller with an engagement letter sent by her outside counsel dated June of 2018. The letter was executed by the former comptroller, but they found no evidence that it was ever authorized by the council or certified by the corporation council, or that the Board of Estimate and Contract had approved the rates in accordance with the charter. So she just acted in a rogue fashion. If she had an expense that she wanted to pay, she found money, she took it from whatever pot she could take it from, and she paid for it. Yeah, you can move forward. I mean, this is just saying some of the same things over and over and over again. And this is just really what the state comptroller says, that the former comptroller incurred outside counsel fees that blatantly disregarded the city's statutory scheme. So, what does this mean moving forward? We continue to ask and call on our state attorney general's office, as well as our state DA's our county DA's office, to investigate the mismanagement, the mishandling, this malfeasance, this rogue behavior of our former comptroller. I know going forward, if you look at the report, there will be a lot of recommendations for what we need to do as the mayor, as the city council, and as the comptroller, the current city comptroller, to handle, to deal with investigations going forward. And I believe we're all unified. We're speaking with a unified voice in saying that we definitely believe that forensic audits are going to be required, and that we're supportive in any of the outside agencies coming in to do further investigations as to how this money was handled. I think in the midst of chaos, it's easy to hide wrongdoing, and there's just too much cash that comes through that office, as well as electronic disbursements that were done, for us not to be concerned of potential criminal behavior. This is not about incompetence. I definitely have some concerns that things were done purposely, and she created systems that were very difficult to understand or made no sense and went against all types of accounting law and procedures, so that she could operate business in the way that she chose to operate business. And so I know, as the mayor, I've put in writing, and I've said it publicly on several occasions, that we are absolutely calling on the state attorney general and the Westchester County DA's office to do investigation into criminal behavior by our former city comptroller. And people want to know how we're going to keep this from happening again. The city has to definitely make sure that you elect competent people. Secondly, we will be doing a major revision of our city charter, which will really bring our written accounting processes and procedures into alignment with the 21st century. But Comptroller Morton, I'll let you speak a little bit more to that, since you are the Chief Fiscal Officer of the city.
Okay. Well, Absolutely. I think that one of the first things is that we all must be concerned about what has happened with the public's money over the last 4 years, right? And we, based upon this report, absolutely it rises to the level that says that we one need to seek, other action. We need to further investigate, which means that from starting off with kind of this forensic kind of review or audit of what has happened, backtracking, especially the cash procedures, how money was brought in, especially the that which is actually cash, how it was documented, how it was actually deposited, and how it was recorded, and to make sure that I did a quick analysis of last year based upon what is reported in our system. We should have brought in a $500,000 in cash through the office, right? I mean, and when you think about that kind of a kind of money coming through, an office like this, and we recognize that we are secure and we have security here, that we are a safe place to transact the business of the city, but we also need to make sure that we're being fully accountable for the money and where it goes. So that's one. Two, people ask the question, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Is that we do, as a fiscal office, work with the executive office and with the legislative office to ensure that we have the right policies, the right procedures, and the practices in place for us to ensure that at no point in time any part of the elected get squeezed out of knowledge for information around the finances in which we all have a fiduciary responsibility for, right? And those are some of the things that we started to do already, right? We may have talked about it earlier, right? We already changed one process. So we have a process in place for our wires, right? We also changed our cash flow process to make sure that we have somebody who's collecting it and somebody who then is actually putting it in a safe place and somebody who's depositing it. We've also reinstituted the police escort, so that we make sure that we have also a police officer that is also with us at all times, guarding over the cash of the city, right? Those are simple things that we can do right now. But as we begin to work with the mayor, the city council, and the department heads to talk about, our accounting procedures, our finance operation, those things will then be part of the charter system for continuous review to make sure. The other thing that we also are going to do is to move as much as we possibly could to digital, electronic kind of transactions, because then, there's always a trail of that when people are paying through their credit cards, through the system, not having to actually exchange money. The less we do that, the more secure our dollars will be. So those are the things that we want to work in place. We're in constant communication, this office, of course, with the state comptroller's office. We're in constant communication with the DA and the state attorney general's office, as well as also other individuals who are helping us to make sure that we are, one, restoring that which was in good place, and then two, also creating those systems in place that the state comptroller's report recommends that we put in place now.
So thank you so much, Controller Morton. Again, Mount Vernon residents, please know that from January 2020, I, as the mayor of the city of Mount Vernon, with the support of then Chief of Staff Morton, and some of our city council partners, definitely asked the state to come in and do these audits. I've seen in the chat why did it take so long to get these done? Because as they, once you start peeling back the onion, you find more and you find more and you find more. Um, and of course, we would have all loved for these reports to come out earlier and someone to remove her from office, but that did not happen. And so we're dealing with it now. We know our diagnoses, and once you know your diagnoses, you pull together your team to help you work through the healing. And that is what we're doing. I have great confidence in our controller. I know that our new city council has seen this report and they have responded to it as well. And I believe that, all of the fiscal body, the legislative body, this administrative body are definitely taking heed to all of the recommendations. And just be clear to separate the actions from the current controller and the former controller, as well as the current mayor and the former mayors. Um, we have some work to do, and we're doing it. And as the controller stated, we are working with partners internally as well as externally to bring in additional support and help. Yes, we will be bringing in forensic auditors. Yes, we will be asking to work with our external auditors and our bond counsel and any of our other advisors to help move Mount Vernon forward and help us to recover financially. But we're asking for your patience. We're asking that you trust this process and know that everything that we're doing is for the fiscal healing and strengthening of Mount Vernon. You
And I
cannot
think,
an elected controller. People just says over and over again, why didn't we fire her? She was an elected official. As elected officials in Mount Vernon, we did not have the power and the control to fire her. It's hard. You cannot fire someone who was elected. They have to be removed by the governor. The governor made the choice not to remove her. Again, with all of the political infighting over the years in Mount Vernon, there were, others in higher offices that just said they didn't want to get involved in this because they couldn't tell until this audit was over is who was telling the truth and who was telling a lie. And so I can't really speak for why, who did what, and what they didn't do it when. We can just say what we're doing, what we do know now, and that we know what we have to do going forward. Controller Morton?
yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, I think that the public should be assured that transparency is going to be part of the process, right? Because we need for everybody to understand what are those steps, and it's my hope that the transparency will also quell some of the misinformation and the disinformation that oftentimes becomes people's reality, right, in this process. And so, but yet, while we are going to be transparent, know that it's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to turn over overnight, right? And there are going to be some things that people are going to scratch their heads at and say, "Well, okay, well, wait a minute, this seems to be taking longer than I thought it would." Well, the question is, do you want it to be right or you want it to be rushed? And what we want to make sure is we have everything that is right, right? And so it's my goal as the comptroller to make sure that we are securing the resources that we bring in, but also that we also have a stronger cash position, right? And this is not a stronger cash position where I'm going to be able to just snap my fingers. It's going to happen overnight. It's going to require for all of us to be a part of that process, right? For us to be able in this office to be able to serve as the internal auditors for what happens in the administration, right? For us to work with external auditors to be able to tell us if we are doing what we're supposed to be doing as it pertains to government accounting standards or the government accounting standards board, right? Because we have some rules around it. We have Gatsby's rules that we have to kind of follow, as well as for us to also be able to work with our public to understand what are those means of revenue. How do we have shared services agreements that will work in the best interest of the residents, the taxpayers, as we move forward. And so we are rebuilding a house, and we're going to make sure that the house is stronger. But we're going to need folks to help us to kind of be a part of that and not try to tear us down as we put a brick up. Don't blow up the whole side of the house because you don't like that color brick. Right?
So I know there have been, people that asked if the former comptroller was bonded. Um, I do believe she did go, well, at
I don't
least,
think so.
no.
I think so. I don't think that she was bonded because the bonding. I think the city's insurance covers the bonding of its officers. I mean, the city council can require additional bonding.
Mhm.
That is something that the city council absolutely can do. Remember, years ago, I think there was the mayor, one of the former mayors, was actually requesting that the city council do that. So the city council does have the authority to say that they want me to go and get extra bonding. But I mean, again, that's an extra cost on the city. If we have enough coverage in our insurance for it, then it all should be fine.
Okay. So I think that's about it. Mount Vernon, please know I know with all that we've been trying to work through and being here on Saturdays and Sundays, we have not done our Sundays with Sean, but Sundays with Sean will be back starting February with different topics. We're going to put information and notices out about the topics that we're discussing. We will be bringing in local experts and people from around the country to talk about some of the challenges that we're dealing with, that we're seeing in other communities. And we just want to keep you updated and informed. Look, we have challenges, but like I said, I think that we have the right people in place now to get this work done. We're going to take air, land, and sea approaches. We are committed to the fiscal recovery of Mount Vernon. We are committed to the good governance of Mount Vernon, and we are committed to working together, even through disagreements, to restore trust, to restore legitimacy in government, and good governance and services to the city of Mount Vernon, our residents and our stakeholders. So thank you so much, Comptroller Morton, for taking out time. We know that there's a major federal report that we have due at 11:59 p.m.
7:59.
So thank you for taking out time to speak to the residents. We didn't just want the newspaper to report or you to see things on the news. We wanted to walk you through some things, but please take out a moment for your reading pleasure to click onto the link so that you can see it all for yourself. We don't want you to think that we only showed things that painted us in a good light and painted her in a negative light, our former comptroller. We only had an hour, and a 50-page report takes much longer, but please go back and look at it for your reading pleasure. Take care, everyone. Have a blessed night, and see you on Sundays with Sean on this coming Sunday at 8 p.m. Be well. Bye-bye.